Well, hey everybody, welcome to Electrical Code Academy's Master the NEC series, where we talk about the National Electrical Code. On today's episode, we are going to talk about a change that took place in the 2017 National Electrical Code, and it expands the use of tray cable. Now, the words, the code text isn't exactly what I wanted it to be. It's pretty good. It does expand the use, but figured we'd explain its use a little bit, because there are confusion out there, especially when generator manufacturers and mini split cable manufacturers, you know, those Mitsubishi style air conditioning units, kind of point of use units, they sometimes come with tray cable, and so there's a lot of confusion. Can you use it? Can you not use it? All those applications. So we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit because you're going to see it in the 2017 National Electrical Code, and it opened the door. Now, a couple things we'll talk about before that was the sheer fact that the code making panel looked at this and really understood that tray cable is really just a more robust SE cable. It is a non-metallic sheath product, and they made that really clear in their comments from the committee. Of course, there were some that were against it, but the reality is the majority of the people that were in the know were actually for it. And when you take away some impartialness due to manufacturings and really put it down to the pure product, you're going to see that it really is just the same as an SE cable. Now, it's not tested like an SE cable under UL 854, but we have no doubt that it will pass those tests. I mean, let's look at it. SE cable typically has a 30 mil jacket or sheathing, whereas a tray cable can be anywhere from 60 to 80 or even more mils of actual sheathing. So it is more robust. Now, there is some caveats to this in the 2017. We have to make sure that it passes a joist pull test, which for the sizes that we're talking about should be no problem. But you do have to add that JP mark onto the actual sheathing of the tray cable in order to be able to meet that application. Not a big deal for the manufacturers to add that mark and to do that testing. But we already do it as a manufacturer. We already do it on SE cable, NM cable, things like that anyways, right? So not a big deal. Already have the rig or set up to do that testing. So we're going to talk about the code change today, and we're going to again dabble into the 2017 National Electrical Code and kind of look at this. Now, our changes today are going to really be focused on 336.10, and that is the uses permitted. It's been cleaned up a little bit, but we're going to talk about that, and we're going to look directly at the code. So hopefully you'll have your 2017 National Electrical Code. I have mine, PDF version, so we're going to show it during this episode for educational purposes only, in order to be able to show you what it looks like in the true form within the National Electrical Code for simplicity and clarity. All right, so let's go on and do that. I'm going to bring up the 2017 NEC, and we can look at it, and I will get rid of me, and we're going to look at this code. All right, so here's, obviously you can see the 2017 edition right here. Right there's the 17, and what we're going to do is we're going to go on to Article 336, and that's going to deal with power and control cables. So here we're at. All right, let's get rid of that, make it a little bigger, and we could even get rid of that. All right, so here we go. We've got that on the screen. So let's go down. One thing you'll notice with 336 is, and it's happened in a lot of the cable articles, was they finally added this listing requirement. It was listed prior to that, and it was done in other areas of the code where it made a reference to it. But here under the 2017, they've added the .6 to many of the cable articles in order to say, hey, type TC cable or MC cables and associated fittings shall be listed. So this not only encompasses the cable, but it also reminds you that the fittings are to be listed as well for that product. Now, keeping in mind that they make many fittings that are for use with many different cable types. Okay, so something that might be a tray cable might also work for another type of cable. Most notably, it might work for a liquid type flexible metallic conduit. You don't know. You have to look at the label, the cartons, in order to make sure it has this listing, and many of them are dual or even triple listed. Okay, so we're going to go to the most notable change here in the uses permitted, and that's 336.10. And one thing before we get there, I will remind you something. You see this one right here, 336.10.3 in raceways. Again, you are permitted to run tray cable in a raceway, okay? Or you can run it in cable trays, okay? Or you can run it outdoors on a messenger, okay? Or you can even direct bury it, as you see over here, which is just a continuation list. You can direct bury it where it's identified for that use, which it is going to be rated for direct burial, okay? So it can be installed in wet locations, okay? Obviously when it's rated here as well. And so those are really all existent. They didn't really change much here. Not more notable that I'm going to do anything with. One we're going to talk about today that's going to have the biggest impact is right here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this in size. And I'm going to move over to it, and I'm going to drop down so we can focus on it. Let me go down a little bit. That was a problem. Let me go over. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to deal with number 9. And number 9 of the uses permitted has changed. Or, well, I shouldn't say change, it expanded the use. That's why it's all gray. It was some changes. It doesn't have a new N beside it, which is, right here. So this was in here, but it kind of expanded its use. Now let's look at it. Now, in the 2000 power and control cables, so in order to be able to use this in 1 and 2 family, it has to contain both power and control. Okay? So it has to have both of those elements involved in it. Now, I don't necessarily agree that that's the way it should be, but that's what the code says. I believe it shouldn't have anything about both. It should contain, it shouldn't have any deal with containing both power and control. So I should be able to run power tray cable or control cable. They don't have to be both applications. But anyway, that's what the code says right now. Now, what is this going to apply to? Well, this is going to apply to generator applications where you're going to run from the transfer switch out to the generator, and you're going to take the power and the signaling control. That component can be run in one tray cable application. For mini split units where you have the conductors from the outside unit to the indoor unit serve as the power and the control source to that indoor unit, signaling its applications, then all of that together is going to be what's going to be power and control. So it's going to expand the use of tray cable type TCER in those applications. So for years, the mini split manufacturers have been sending tray cable out, and unless it was installed in a cable tray or in a raceway, then it was many times through the country was rejected. If you put it in a raceway, obviously not an issue. I don't know what the big deal is with people that are really concerned. You're going to hear some manufacturers cry and moan about tray cable being used inside of a building without being in a raceway. And I'm going to tell you right now, the only reason they're crying about that is because they either don't make tray cable and they feel like it actually puts pressure on their existing product line, like MC cables. It's purely monetary. I'm telling you, it's purely monetary. When they say that it's for use in an industrial application only, for certain applications where you use the ER, that is an even more stringent location than you would in a dwelling, yet they still cry about it. Yet it's okay there, but it's not okay in a commercial building, like maybe to remote distribution panels as a feeder. I don't understand it because it is just like SE cable. It is just a little thicker sheathing, but it's the same interconductors. I don't know what the big deal is except for it has something to do with monetary issues. In other words, it's infringing on other products that sell well, and you're afraid that it's going to drop the sales of one product because of the expanded use of another product. I'm an electrician at heart. I don't worry about that. My company that I work for makes both. We don't care about that. We're all about the expanded use of products to help electricians have other options. Of course, there might be an application where you'd want a little more robust type of sheathing, where you really don't feel comfortable with the SE, but you might feel comfortable with the tray cable. I think you should be able to run it. That's why somebody should put in a code proposal to remove this right here, actually what you should remove is that whole part right there in shaded should be removed. So I look for somebody to submit a code proposal to remove that. Again, what's the difference? If you can run power, you can run control, it shouldn't matter. And tray cable comes in power and control, and it comes in just power conductors only. You know, I'm not so sure what the big deal is on it, but you know, again, it's to try to stipend the use of the product, I'm sure. Now, the other guidance we have here, and I'm okay with this language, that it should identify for pulling through structural members that are permitted, and that's going to be found down here in this informational note where it says that it's suitable for pull through structural members, has to be marked with the JP. That is not going to be an issue for the sizes that we're talking about. We're not talking about 750, 500s, and 1,000 kc mil conductors, which might work, but I don't think you're going to be pulling them through structural joist members. I mean, I'm just saying you might not. But the smaller ones, yes. So not an issue to add the JP on that, but just remember, if you're the jurisdiction who's looking to allow the use of tray cable, then it's got to have that JP mark on it. Now, it goes on to say, type TCER cable used in interior wiring shall be installed per the requirements of Part 2 of Article 334. All right? Now, let me bring me back. Forever, I thought that that was going to be a little restrictive. I was like, well, I got to rewrite this whole article, and I have been telling people I'm going to rewrite 336. When I read this, I really don't. I am agreeant that you install it in accordance with 334. I have no problem with that. Secure it and support it in accordance with 334.30. Do everything the same as you would for a normal non-metallic sheet cable. Have no problem with that. That's not the issue. So, I don't really think that 336 now, as it sits, needs to be rewritten. I do think that it needs to change some of that language. Now, here's the one part that I do have a problem with. Why are you limiting it to 1 and 2 family? So you've got two extremes here. Okay, now these are my opinions, and I am very opinionated. So, you can use it in industrial. Now you can use it in 1 and 2 family. But what about those multifamily buildings or their high rises, and maybe some engineers want that robust sheathing, so they're going to spec out the use of tray cable to go out to those remote distribution panels. It's the same interconductors. It's just a more robust sheathing that is less prone to damage during installation. So, I mean, we do get those occasional calls where SE cable, the jacket is stripped and damaged during the installation. How do you repair it? All those other aspects. Well, with tray cable, you have less of a worry about that. It's just much thicker. Again, the interconductors are the same. Whether or not you're using THHN, THWN-2, or XHHW-2 in your construction, the same can be done for an SE cable. It's a non-metallic sheath product. So people say, why expand its use? We already have an SE cable. We already have an MC cable. Well, the reason is this kind of bridges the gap between two. The tray cable gets tested the same crush and impact as an MC cable would, yet it still maintains the flexibility and the non-metallic nature of something like an SE cable and like an SER. It has the best of both worlds mixed into it. So it does have its usage, and I think that it will have a bigger use. It is just, it would be no different than taking an SE cable, irrelevant to the standard of UL 854, and turning around and just doubling that insulation, or that thickness, excuse me, not insulation, the thickness of the sheathing. On an SE cable, you get the same benefits, although that standard has a minimum set standard for producing that product, which is the 30 mils, and the size it can depend. But here we have a more robust sheathing, a non-metallic jacket, if you will, on a tray cable, and it does have its potential usage. So those that are down, now here's what I encourage you to do. Go read the information that came from the second draft, or the, I guess this it's the public comments, and you'll see that only 3 people disagreed with the expanded use. And I won't tell you who they represent, but I will tell you, you will not see our company speaking against it, because we make all those products. Okay, when I say our company, not ECA, or the Master of the NEC series, we're talking about a company that I work for commercially, okay, that we manufacture wire and cable. So we make it all, so it just doesn't matter to us. We believe in expanding the use of the product, letting people choose how they use a product for where they use it. There are engineers who want that robustness and would like to spec out. Now, let's get back to MC cable now. I want to talk some of the nuances. So this is the expansion. Let's go back to the NEC. All right, so the NEC says that you insecure, do everything in accordance with Part 2. There's an exception here because you know what? In Part 2, you've got all the limitations for terminals like you will with non-metallic sheath cable, 60 degree, blah, 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 and all that stuff. So all of the Part 2 has to meet the requirement for this installation. There is an exception. It says we're used to connect a generator and associated equipment having terminals rated 75 degrees C or higher. The cable shall not be limited to the ampacity by 334.80 or 340.80. That's for UF. So that's what it's saying. So let's go back to me so we're clear. Okay. So what it's saying is, all right, I still have to meet all the limitations of 334.80 under normal usage. If I'm taking it to the mini split or I'm taking this in there. But when I have a generator application, I can go by the rating of the lugs on the generator, pretty much saying ignore exception 334.80. They could have put that on the end of it like we've done many times before, like with SC cable applications. Okay, they could have done that, but kind of put it in an exception, and that's cool. Looks good. So that is the rule if you're dealing with the generator, which is what really started this into the code. It was the generator people pushing it to get it in there because a lot of times they will ship this TCER, but a lot of jurisdictions would say, no, you can't use it because the code really gives you only 4 applications that are permitted for use, right? In the raceway, on a messenger or outside, in a cable tray, or direct bury where it's listed. And that was pretty much into your usage. Now let's talk about the use of it in a raceway. Now, many people, let's say if you were to take it to a cabinet, a lot of people would argue that 312.5c, which says all cables have to be secured to the actual cabinet, would come into play. And I would tend to agree, except for I have contacted NFPA as an informal interpretation, and they have said, look, the whole purpose of this connection to the cabinet was for the abrasion application. So if you got a complete raceway system or it's completely connected to the enclosure and it ends in, there's no abrasion. So I guess it's not an issue. But I don't necessarily think 312.5c is for only just abrasion. If it was, then why would you need the exception to take in all non-metallic sheath products into one non-flexible raceway as long as it was at least 18 inches and not more than 10 feet and it was a surface-mounted cabinet? I don't know. What would be the purpose of having that exception? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just telling you what they've said. As far as a manufacturer of wire and cable, I don't really care. But if I have, it does permit you to run it into a raceway. And as far as an informal interpretation from NFPA, they believe you do not have to apply the requirements to secure that cable to the cabinet. And I would assume that also applies to the box as well under 314. Not my interpretation. That is an informal interpretation from NFPA, and I'm more than happy to share that with you if you have any questions about it, if you agree or you disagree. Okay. Any other time, we want to make sure that the cable is secured to the cabinet in accordance with 312.5c. Okay, just want to make that statement clear. Not my interpretation. I guess it makes sense. I don't know that 312.5c is just an abrasion issue, because then what would be the point of the exception? But anyway, I did pose that question to NFPA, and that is the response I got. So we'll leave it at that. I can agree to disagree. Your jurisdiction is going to have to make that call. Probably no harm, no foul, but anyway. So you can run it in a raceway on a messenger if it's supported independently from the messenger. There's a method for doing that. Direct bury, all of ours, for example, at Encore Wire or any of the manufacturers will make a direct burial rated tray cable. And then what you're going to see is in the future, they're going to have JP on there as well, which I just wanted to give you the heads up. If you're a jurisdiction that's saying, oh, I can't wait to start accepting tray cable, TCER, just make sure you look for that JP, okay? Now, when this starts coming out and it doesn't have JP on it, and you might have some smaller tray cable that's TCER, you know, personally, I wouldn't have a heartburn over it because this is a transition period where the manufacturers will start putting JP on it. But I can tell you up to probably about, I don't know, probably about 2/0 and down, you know, it's still going to pull through the joist fine. Once we start getting above that, then you got to kind of do some testing on it and make sure it pulls through. I believe ours will pull for it all the way up to 4/0 with no problem. But look for that JP. Okay, that's a new part of the requirement in the the 2017 requirement. All right, let's go back to the code book. All right, so you're at your exception number 1. That tells you about the JP, and then of course you got a, not exception, that's the informational note number 1, good information, and informational note number 2 reminds you to see 725.136 for limitations on class 2 and class 3, containing within the same cable with conductors of electric pipe, power, light, and class 1 circuits. Again, that's where we have newer products like the MC cable that has a class 2 and class 3 with the power. And it's in a cable system with the metal armor. Doesn't require separation. In this application, it's going to probably reference you to some separation requirements. Okay. All right. Well, let me get back to me and kind of close this thing out. Hopefully you learned something today. That is the general expansion for 336.10 of the National Electrical Code. There were some other little nuance changes, but that's the most significant one that we can talk about today. Again, it expands the use of tray cable, the TCER style, inside of a 1 and 2 family dwelling. So here's my challenge to you people out there. Show me that you're listening. I look for your public inputs for the 2020 cycle to remove that section that that portion of that item that I talked about. It shouldn't have to be limited to power, both power and control. If I want to run the tray cable to a panel in a 1 and 2 family dwelling, I shouldn't have to worry about the power and control. I should be able to just run power. It's my choice what wiring method that I want to use. Why are we limiting tray cable to an application of those 4 locations when it is obviously the same as SE cable, constructed the same? Interconductors are the same. Conductor material, copper or aluminum, it's the same. Jackets, sheathings are thicker. What's the harm? I don't get it. And it allows that security of having a little thicker sheathing that some people just want. They just want a thicker sheathing in case it gets cut or nicked or whatever during the pull. It just makes sense to me. And it's a choice that the contractor has to make, not the one that the code should make. Contract. So I look for you, submit those public inputs that remove that portion that says for containing both power and control. I look for that. When I see you do it, I'll know that you saw this video. Also, think about submitting to remove the restriction to only 1 and 2 family dwellings. What is wrong with it running this product, the same application in commercial, light commercial, multifamily high-rise applications? Where's the harm? Just because we make multiple products for the application doesn't mean we got to keep one product from being used. Hey, I'm an electrician. I mean, everything at the end of the day, that's what I am. I'm just an electrician. And what I like is my options. I want to run MC, tray cable ER. I want to run SE cable if I want. My options. This is another viable option that's a little more robust than a standard SE cable. Choice is yours. So hopefully you get the message. Hopefully you learned something today. Great change. Good start for the 2017 when it comes to tray cable TCER expansion. I look for a lot more. Hopefully I got your support. Thanks again and God bless.